I always thought life changed abruptly, like a thunderstorm that hits a house without warning. But that morning showed me. Sometimes fate arrives not like lightning, but with a simple phone call. So simple that at first you don't even pay attention to it. I woke up early, not because I was in a hurry, rather because I felt a strange uneasiness in my chest, as if a thought was stirring somewhere deep inside that I hadn't yet had time to hear. The room was dimly lit. The curtains let in the gray morning air, the same one where you can still feel the remnants of night. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened carefully to the house. The old walls creaked, the radiator hummed softly, as if purring. Mira, the cat, lay on the windowsill, stretched out like a strand of fur, watching me with lazy eyes. Sometimes I think she understands me better than people. I stood up slowly, so my joints wouldn't protest too loudly. I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and grabbed my favorite cup. The morning was quiet. Quiet in the way that only happens in homes where elderly people live, when there's no rush and time passes with soft steps, without disturbing the breath. I held the cup with both hands, warming my fingers, when suddenly the phone vibrated on the table. Loud. Sharp. It's scary how such sounds can frighten you in old age. As if the whole world had burst into your little morning space. On the screen, her daughter's name, Alia. I inhaled slowly. Alia usually calls quickly, decisively, always between tasks, as if she were holding a stopwatch rather than a phone. Occasionally, she asks how I'm feeling, but more often, she asks me for something. Babysitting my grandson, picking up a package, cooking something for them, helping with something. I loved her. I love her. But I've learned to live in a way that doesn't require too much from her. I pressed the green button. Mom, she said hurriedly, as if she were already late. Mom, listen, I have a favor to ask. Can you babysit Timka on Saturday? Serioza, and I have to leave. She didn't even ask if I was busy, but I wasn't angry. Habit is a wonderful thing. Olechka, I said quietly, so my voice would be gentle. I have a doctor's appointment on Saturday. A checkup? I made an appointment a long time ago. Pause. A pause that fell on the conversation like a heavy stone. Mom, just reschedule. Her voice suddenly grew colder. This is a doctor, and we have plans. I felt the words cut me not sharply, but deeply inside. Where old wounds live, ones you usually leave alone. It can't be rescheduled, I said a little quieter. I've been waiting in line for 2 months. I need this test. Need. She repeated, as if tasting the word. Don't we need it? Isn't it hard for us? I closed my eyes. She wasn't listening. She was just talking. Too quickly, too defensively, too familiarly. It's only 1 day, she continued. Why can't you? Why is it always like this? Always like this. A word that doesn't apply to someone who's been there for decades when needed. I remembered helping her at night when Timka was a baby. How she sat with him for weeks. How she gave away almost her entire pension during a difficult year for them. How she did everything she could. But in her voice, it was as if it had never happened. Alia, I said calmly, I can't right now. Her breathing changed. It became sharper, heavier. You know what, she said. Do as you please. Just don't be surprised later when we, too, will live our own lives without constantly looking over our shoulders. If you don't want to be part of the family, that's your business. It was like ice water pouring down my back. You don't want to be part of the family. Not loudly, not shouting, but so accurately that my fingers trembled. Alia, I began, but she didn't let me finish. I'll call back. And she hung up. The beeps became long and lonely, filling the apartment.
He sat motionless,
with a cup that had long since gone cold, with hands that didn't know what to do with themselves. The word family rang in my chest like a thin, cracked bell. So, for them, I'm a resource? A helper? A convenience? And when I said no, were they erasing me? And at that moment, the silence became so loud that for the first time, I truly heard my loneliness. I didn't cry. I thought tears now would be unfair, not to her, but to me. We cry when we're hurt unexpectedly. And here, so the wound was long ago. Only today had a finger touched it. I stood up and went to the window. Mira quietly followed me, rubbing against my legs as if afraid to leave me. Outside, the morning was breaking. Little by little, the snow glistened as if covered in powdered sugar. People passed by, busy, quick, and alive. And I thought,
and who'll think about me?
who needs me if not myself? The answer was simple. Nobody. And for some reason, this didn't frighten me. But on the contrary, it gave me a strange sense of truth. I walked around the house all day, as if trying on these new thoughts about how being convenient doesn't mean being loved. That saying no isn't a betrayal. That I have a right to doctors, to health, to peace, to myself. By evening, I felt something inside me straighten out, as if I'd been standing in a hunched position all this time, and now I stood up straight for the first time. And before going to bed, I caught myself with an unexpected thought. Maybe this is the beginning of some new life. Not a loud one, not a big one, but mine. I lay down on the bed. Mira curled up next to me. Silence fell again, but this time it was different. Not frightening, but promising. And I knew tomorrow would begin not a new chapter in my life, but a new me. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The silence in the house was thick, like an old blanket, a little heavy, but warm. I lay and listened to it, as if someone who had long wanted to talk to me was hiding within it. Sometimes we hear the world too loudly, and sometimes too quietly, but only in silence can we hear ourselves. I rolled over onto my side and felt my back stretch. Age teaches us not to rush. Every movement should be soft, as if you were holding something fragile, probably because you yourself are becoming fragile. Mira, my cat, was already waiting. She sat on the floor, looking at me intently, as if asking, "So, does life go on?" "Yes," I told her quietly. "It goes on." And I stood up. Everything in the kitchen was familiar. The gray light by the window, the cup in the same place, the old tablecloth that had absorbed the years. I put the kettle on and got out the tea. But yesterday's cup, the one that had cooled during our conversation, was still standing just as I'd left it. I looked at it for a long moment. It seemed like a symbol of the day not ending as it should have. And I poured the rest of the tea into the sink, slowly, as if saying goodbye to something. Only then could I breathe more freely. I poured fresh tea and sat at the table. As the steam rose in a thin stream, The internal conversation I'd put off yesterday opened up. Why did her words hurt so much? Why did I let them sink so deeply? Why do I still think about this? The answers were right there, but I was afraid to speak them, because the truth is hard, especially in old age. As the years go by, you begin to understand. Sometimes it's not our children who abandon us, but we ourselves who give away everything we have and forget to keep anything for ourselves. And when one day you say no, they're surprised. As if you can't have your own life. As if you're furniture. Reliable, but speechless. I sighed. The tea warmed my palms. This simple, warm ritual always restored my inner order. After breakfast, I forced myself outside. The cool air blew across my face, as if it wanted to bring me back to my senses. There was barely any wind, only a light freshness, a reminder that spring is somewhere nearby, even if it hasn't yet decided to enter. The courtyard was empty, quiet, but not lonely, just calm. I walked slowly, feeling the crunch of old ice under my feet. Every step reverberated through my body. But I didn't complain. Pain teaches you to be mindful of yourself. Grandfather Vladimir sat at the next door, as always with his pigeons. He was crumbling bread, and the birds around him seemed like his little retinue. "Maria," he called out, seeing me. "You've been out for a while." "A little busy," I said. He looked at me more closely than usual. "You seem so thoughtful today." "It happens," I replied. He nodded. We'd known each other for a long time, so long that we could share silence together without awkwardness. "Children?" he asked quietly. I was surprised, but the answer came naturally. "Children. It's the same with them all," he chuckled, tossing another crumb to the pigeons. "First we give our lives for them, then years, and then they think we owe them something." I smiled softly. What a simple, yet precise truth. "Don't take it too seriously, Maria," he said. "They're in a hurry, nervous, fussy. They think old age is a quiet shore, but we're still swimming in the sea, only more slowly." I looked at the pigeons, at their flapping wings, at their calm, and suddenly I felt better. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" he asked, surprised. "For saying what I was thinking." He merely waved his hand, as if he were shooing away not the pigeons, but my worries. Returning home, I felt a strange new lightness. Small, barely noticeable, like the first ray of sunshine appearing behind a cloud. I decided to get down to business. I dusted. I sorted through the paper drawer. I changed the water for the flowers. I did everything slowly, not because I was old, but because there was no need to rush. And then, opening the old box, I found something unexpected. A scroll of letters. Yellowed, tied with an old ribbon. Letters from my mother. Her quiet, kind words, written in her neat handwriting. I took the first one, opened it,
and read.
"Daughter, don't be afraid to be yourself. Even if someone doesn't understand it, the most important thing is you." I closed my eyes. A subtle tremor appeared somewhere in my chest. Warmth mixed with sadness. As if my mother were telling me this today. As if she knew I would need to hear it many years later. I sat for a long time. The letter warmed my hands, as if it held a piece of her warmth. And suddenly everything became clear. I had forgotten about myself. Completely. Totally. So much so that the word no came as a surprise to everyone. And if I continue living like this, I will lose what little remains. Health, self-respect, the ability to feel.
No.
I don't want this anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I said out loud, in a quiet voice, "A person needs me too. Himself." These words were just air, but they sounded in the room as if I had opened a window in a long closed space. That afternoon, I brewed fresh tea and sat by the window, and I allowed myself to do nothing. Just be. Not for anyone else. Not for anyone's benefit, but just because. It was a small but important step, and as evening approached, I felt there was more light inside. Not bright, not solemn, but subtle, quiet, as if my soul had finally exhaled. I didn't yet know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing. I would never return to my old self, even if it made someone uncomfortable. And that thought brought me peace. A real, mature, well-deserved peace. Sometimes change sounds loud, like a door slamming, and sometimes silence itself pushes you to a decision. And the next morning was just like that, quiet, but filled with some strange tension, as if the air was waiting for me to finally take a step. I woke up to the phone on the nightstand lit up. It didn't ring, it just flashed, as if checking to see if I was there. Message. One word. Serioza. Son-in-law. My daughter's husband. It was strange to see his name. He rarely communicated with me directly, always through Alia. And if he was calling, that meant yesterday's situation had affected her more than she'd admitted. I opened the message. Can we talk? Should I call? I slowly lowered the phone to my lap. My insides tightened, not from fear, but rather from anticipation. Call, I wrote. A few seconds later, the phone vibrated. Sharply, insistently. I picked up. Good morning, Maria Alexievna. His voice was tired, even, without unnecessary emotion. I hope I didn't wake you? No, I'm already up. Okay. He exhaled. I wanted to talk about yesterday. I sat still, listening to his breathing, hearing him choose his words. Alia, she was very upset. You understand. Yes, I said. I understand. But I understand you too. I raised my eyebrows. I didn't expect that. At all. You know, he continued, I saw your test results on the refrigerator. By accident. And, well, I understand that you weren't just refusing. You really do need to see a doctor. I felt a little awkward, but at the same time warm. Not because he saw the papers, but because he noticed. So it means he didn't pass me by. Thank you, Serioza, I said quietly. And I wanted to say, he seemed to gather his courage, that you have every right to take care of yourself. Every right. Honestly, I wanted to tell Alia for a long time that she's putting too much pressure on you. I remained silent, because the words I'd been wanting to hear for so many years weren't being spoken by someone close to me, but by someone who's practically a stranger to me. It's just, he continued, Alia's getting tired. She's become nervous, and she thinks she can handle it alone. But that's not true, and you can't always be the backup option. It's wrong. I felt my shoulders straighten inside, as if he'd said something I'd been hesitant to admit to myself. We talked last night, he said. I told her she was unfair, very unfair, and that you need time, and that we shouldn't take away your health. You. He hesitated, choosing his words. You're important to us. Really? I exhaled. So quietly he probably didn't hear. Think about it, he added. But I wanted you to know I support you. And he hung up, and I remained sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, thinking of only one thing. Why do words of support sound so loud when you least expect them? I went to the window. The light was soft, slightly bluish, the kind that appears before true spring. The silence still lingered, but no longer oppressive. It was as if listening. A thought slowly formed in my head. If even my son-in-law understood, then I truly have a right to myself. Maybe to them I wasn't a person but a habit? But habits can be changed. All day I walked around the apartment as if I were walking on water, carefully, thoughtfully. I tried not to think about Alya's words from yesterday, but they kept coming back. If you don't want to be part of the family, now that phrase sounded different. Not like an insult, but like a cry of exhaustion. I turned on the radio, just to drown out the noise. But the music was too quiet. So I turned it off and was alone with the house again. I decided to organize my things. Not because I had to, but because my thoughts flow more easily when my hands are busy. I opened the closet and started rearranging the boxes. And in one of them, I found a small green envelope. I immediately remembered. It was a letter Alya wrote me about 20 years ago when she was moving to a new apartment. I was helping her pack, and she gave me the letter, saying, "You can read it later." I read it once, but I forgot. Now I opened the envelope again. The handwriting was young, confident, beautiful. It was strange to see the letters written in a hand that now holds the phone differently, more firmly, more quickly. I began to read.
Mom,
I know I often don't say thank you to you, but you're the only person with whom I'm not afraid to be myself. You're my home. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have made it. I'm sorry, I rarely say this out loud, but you're the best mom. And I love you. I felt something inside me tighten, but not painfully, rather softly, as if an old wound was closing. I reread the letter several times, and each line sounded as if it wasn't 20-year-old Alya speaking, but the Alya I once knew. Gentle, open, sensitive. I quietly put the letter back in the envelope. And for the first time, I felt no resentment, because I understood. That girl inside her hadn't gone anywhere. She was just tired. And sometimes fatigue speaks louder than a person. Late in the evening, as I was putting dinner on the stove, my phone vibrated again. I approached slowly. Alya was on the screen. I stared at the name for a long time. Not because I hesitated to answer, but because I wanted to give myself a second. I pressed accept. Mom. Her voice was quiet, not harsh, not cold, just tired.
can we talk?
Of course we can.
She sighed.
As if she were carrying something heavy.
I
was wrong. Yesterday. Very wrong. I understand. I remained silent. Not because I was angry. I was simply listening to her. Serioza told me you were going to the doctor. That you had tests. Mom, why didn't you tell me? I smiled faintly.
Why?
You have enough on your plate as it is. She fell silent.
Long.
Too long. Mom. Her voice grew wet. It's not right. I need you. So much. She swallowed. I'm afraid sometimes that I can't handle it. that everything will fall apart if you don't back me up. And I put pressure.
On you.
I sat down on a chair to keep my balance, not with my feet, but with my heart. Alia, I said quietly, you shouldn't have to cope alone, but I shouldn't be your support at the expense of my own health. She took a deep breath. I know, she whispered.
I'm sorry.
Please. And it sounded so real.
Pure.
As if she'd finally allowed herself to be small. If only for a minute. I suddenly realized she wasn't angry. She was exhausted. A young woman, driven by life like the wind, without respite. And I just found myself caught in that wind. I exhaled. It's okay, honey, I said. We'll figure it out. Just let's learn to listen to each other. Okay. She sobbed, quietly, almost soundlessly. Okay, Mom. And at that moment, I felt something important return. Not completely. Not right away. But it was returning. That evening, sitting by the window, I watched the darkness fall. The house hummed with its old sounds. Mira snored in the armchair. And I thought, it seems like today I've stopped being a shadow and become myself. At least a little. I felt calmer, quieter inside. And for the first time I felt, tomorrow isn't scary. There are days when the world seems slightly tilted. Not dangerous, not abrupt, just lightly. And you walk as if clutching the air with your hands, so as not to fall, although you don't know where. This morning was exactly like that. I woke up earlier than usual, not from anxiety, not from the ringing bell, but from a feeling, as if something was waiting ahead. Not scary, no, just important. Mira was still asleep, curled up on an old blanket. I went to the window and opened the sash. The air was cool, clean, smelling of something very early, almost spring-like. And in that silence I felt freedom. Small, shaky, but mine. I thought for a long time about yesterday's conversation with Alia. Her words haunted me, especially one. I feel like if you're not here, everything will collapse.
How is that?
This is love. But love is tired, confusing care with dependence, demanding, not asking. I sighed quietly, poured myself some tea, and sat down at the table. Yesterday, I think I did something very important. I stopped making excuses, and it turned out to be easier than I thought. I finally decided to go to the doctor around lunchtime. Don't put it off as long as you can. The problem won't go away on its own, and it's not about the diagnosis, but about the fact that I've finally started to choose myself. I dress neatly, a dark dress, a soft sweater, an old but beloved scarf in a misty shade. I paused in front of the mirror for just a second, and for the first time in a long time, I liked myself. Not young, not strong, but alive, and quietly confident. Rode to the clinic. When I left the house, the world seemed a little brighter, as if someone had swept away the colors, not added them, but simply wiped away the dust. I walked to the bus stop, slowly, breathing evenly, listening to the footsteps. The city was alive with its own life. Children lugging school bags, someone cursing into their phones, someone hurrying, not looking where they were going. And I walked slowly, because for the first time in many days, I had nowhere to rush. No one was pushing me. No one was waiting. And this feeling was light, even a little frightening. The clinic smelled of paint and old furniture. I walked to the therapist's office and sat down on a chair against the wall. A couple of minutes later, the door opened. Maria Alexievna? The doctor looked younger than I expected, about 45. Intent eyes, calm hands. I did. I nodded and walked in. He flipped through my test results, chuckled, and peered over his glasses. How long has your blood pressure been fluctuating? A long time, I admitted honestly. Why didn't you come earlier? I smiled a slightly tired smile. There was always so much time. He looked at me sternly, but not harshly. You have to put yourself first. Otherwise, you'll have to put yourself last. He said so simply what I couldn't articulate for years. We talked for about 20 minutes. He prescribed treatment, nothing critical but not a trifle either. You need rest, he said, and no one should demand more of you than you can give. Do you understand me? I nodded, very slowly, because for the first time in many years, the doctor spoke to me as a person whose condition was important, not as a convenient grandmother who had to endure, but as himself. Return. When I went outside, the air became warmer.
Or so it seemed to me because I felt lighter inside.
I walked home slowly for a long time, and halfway there I wanted to go to the park, just sit on a bench. So childishly free. I sat by the pond. The light ripples reflected the sky. People walked along the paths. Someone was feeding the pigeons. I took out my phone and looked at the screen. No calls. No messages. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't hurt. It felt right.
Home.
When I returned home, it was already getting dark. I made myself a light soup, nothing special, but it had a homey aroma, the kind that always makes you feel calmer. I sat at the table and thought not about my illness, not about the doctors, but about myself, about how, for the first time, I was allowing myself to live slowly, in my own rhythm. While I was eating, my phone lit up again. Message. From Alya. I opened it. Mom, I want to come over tonight. Alone. May I? I felt my heart clench, not from pain, but from a deep, quiet anxiety. The request was cautious, not demanding, and I understood. She was afraid. Not for me, for the connection that had broken yesterday. I typed, "Come over, dear. I'm home." And as my fingers pressed send, a feeling grew inside me. Something very important would happen today. Not loud, not abrupt, but resonant. Evening. Alya arrived 2 hours later. She knocked softly, almost inaudibly. When I opened the door, she was standing in the doorway, small, confused, without makeup, her hair pulled back haphazardly. I haven't seen her like this in a long time. "Mom," she said quietly, "I'm here."
Come in.
She entered and immediately took off her shoes, a sign she felt guilty. Alya always did that when she knew she'd said too much. She went into the kitchen and sat at the table. I poured her tea. Her hands were shaking.
Mom, I'm sorry.
For everything. I was wrong, and tired, and scared, but not angry, not at you. She kept talking, quickly, as if she were afraid I'd leave. It's just, sometimes I forget that you're human too, that you need to live too, not just help. You've been my support for so many years, and I've started to take it for granted. I'm ashamed, Mom. And then she looked up at me, the eyes of a grown woman, tired, guilty, but honest. And mine. I took her hand, warm, trembling, and said, "Everything's fine.
Really fine.
But you and I need to relearn how to be a family, not through pressure, but through care." She nodded and began to cry quietly, so quietly that the tears felt like warm drops of rain. I sat next to her, listening to her breathing, and thought, for the first time in years, we're talking to each other, not in passing. When she left, the apartment became very quiet, but the silence was different, soft. Not oppressive, but embracing. I went to the window. A few streetlights glowed outside the glass, and the wind rustled the slender branches. And I thought, it seems I'm only just beginning to understand what it means to live for myself, and next to those who are ready to meet you halfway. Sometimes life changes not because of big events, but because of little things, subtle, almost imperceptible, so quiet that they could be mistaken for the wind. I thought that after Alia's visit, I would feel light inside, but the night turned out to be strange.
Not anxious, no.
More like wary, as if my house were listening to me.
Night.
I couldn't sleep for a long time. I lay on my side, listening to Myra's even breathing, the rustle of the curtain, the soft click of the radiator. But most of all, to myself. Something stirred inside me. It wasn't resentment, not anger, not doubt. It was a premonition, as if I'd taken a step I should have taken long ago. But now the whole world was testing me to see if I could take it. When I finally managed to fall asleep, I dreamed something strange. I was standing at the threshold of my apartment, and the door wasn't mine. The same handle, the same hinges, but the door itself, old, almost darkened, alien. And the key was missing from the lock. I stared at the darkness in the doorway for a long time in my dream, and woke up with a feeling that something was about to happen. Not bad, but important. Morning. I woke up late, almost 10. Rarely, my body felt heavy, as if I'd spent the whole night struggling with myself. I put the kettle on, opened the curtains, and saw a small envelope on the windowsill. It was white and thin, as if it had been placed under the door, but it was lying right there on the windowsill inside the apartment. I froze. I know for sure that the windows were closed last night, and the windowsill was empty. I remember this because I put the chamomile cup in there. I took the envelope. There was no name or handwriting on it. Nothing, just a blank envelope made of thin paper like pharmacy receipts. I carefully opened it. Inside was a small piece of paper. Just one line. Save your strength. You'll need it soon. I sat up. Not abruptly, slowly, like someone who feels the ground beneath their feet has become a little softer than it should be. I reread the line once, twice, 3 times. The font was printed.
Smooth.
Not typewritten, a computer. But the paper was a bit old. I mentally ran through everyone who might have brought the note. Alia?
No.
She came last night upset. She had neither a bag nor envelopes.
Seriosa?
We hardly ever communicate directly. Neighbor Lena? She's always too shy to even call. Maybe a postal error? But who brings the envelope inside the apartment? Maybe I forgot?
No.
I wouldn't write such a phrase and hide it. Maybe it doesn't mean anything at all? Just someone's mistake? But why this strange chill down my spine? And why do the words seem not a threat, but a warning? Quiet, caring, as if someone knows more than I do.
Der.
I drank my tea for a long time. Too long. My sips were small, concentrated, as if I wanted to hear the answer in them. But there was no answer, only silence, which now seemed denser. Not scary, but different. Mira came up to me, asking for attention, rubbing against my leg, stretching. Animals always sense when someone is worried. I stroked her back. She purred, but somehow anxiously. Not like usual, not soothingly, as if she was trying to figure out what had changed. The day went on as usual, but slightly differently. I washed the dishes, and every drop of water seemed louder than usual. I sorted through the vegetables, and felt as if I could hear the sounds a little deeper. Not intrusively, but attentively. Memory brought back the note. Always the same phrase. Save your strength. You'll need it soon. Who will need it?
Me?
Alia? Her grandson? Or maybe it wasn't me at all, just a coincidence? But if it was a coincidence, why can't I forget it? Alia didn't call. That was strange too. Usually, if she cried, she'd start writing long messages afterwards, sometimes apologizing, sometimes explaining herself. But today, silence. I looked at my phone, blank screen, and inside, I felt a slight shadow of anxiety touch my chest. I decided to do some cleaning this afternoon. I needed it, not the apartment, but me. When my hands are working, my head breathes more freely. But even cleaning seemed different today. I climbed up to the attic, sorting through old boxes, and found a small tin of buttons. My mother's. She always said, when you don't know what to do, sort through your buttons. The world will become quieter. I poured them out on the table. The metal clinked. Different shapes, different eras, different coats, different stories. And from the scattered buttons, a small note fell, yellowed.
Old.
I don't think I've ever seen it. The handwriting wasn't mine, and not Mom's. On the note were just 3 words. You can endure anything. I froze. Wait a second. Maybe 2. This is too strange. Too much of a coincidence. The envelope this morning.
The note now.
Not scary, but too precise. Too timely. I carefully placed both notes side by side, and looked at them for a long time, as if they themselves could tell me where they came from.
And why?
Towards evening, the anxiety wasn't acute, but quiet, as if someone was quietly coughing in the next room, and I couldn't figure out who. As it began to get dark, my soul felt a little colder. Not blue, not dreary, just more empty. I closed the windows tighter, ran my hand over the countertop, and felt a pinch of old dust, which had settled in the morning. There wasn't one. It was as if someone had just walked past. Or maybe I was too tired.
Phone.
At 8 o'clock in the evening, the phone finally vibrated. Alia's number was on the screen. My heart sank a little lower than usual. I answered almost immediately. Mom. Her voice was quiet even, not crying. Mom, don't be scared. Everything is fine. It's just, I need to tell you something. What, honey? She exhaled. I heard a tremor.
Mom, I'm pregnant.
The room became so quiet that I heard the light bulb click. The anxiety that had been hovering around the apartment all day, like a shadow, became clear at that moment. Not a threat, not mysticism, but a simple human truth. I really will need strength. A lot. A lot. But then why did the notes appear before she told me? I didn't answer Alia right away. Not from shock, but from the fact that my heart seemed to stop for a second. Not from anxiety, no, but from too much that came at once. Pregnant. The words seemed to open a new window in the room. A draft entered softly, but noticeably. Olechka was all I could say. Are you sure? Yes. Her voice was quiet, tired, but not broken. I took a test, and I went to the doctor. Already. Everything is accurate. I felt something warm fill my chest. Happiness mixed with a shadow. Happiness because a new life would be added to my family. Shadow because I knew, for Alia, this wouldn't just be news. It would be a test. Mom, she continued after a pause, I don't know if I'm happy or scared. Probably both. I heard her take a deep breath. Are you home now? She asked. Home. Can I come? Alone. Without Serioza. I just need to be near you. These words always made something warm and fragile inside me, as if I were home again for her. Not a support system based on obligation, but a quiet place where she could relieve her fear. Come, I said. I'm waiting for you. Waiting. When she hung up, I sat in the kitchen, listening to the silence. And for the first time in years, it didn't seem empty. It was like a deep breath before a conversation that would change everything. I poured myself some tea, but my hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from excitement. I had to remind myself. I need a calm head. Alia shouldn't rely on my anxiety, but on my maturity. And then I remembered the envelope from this morning. Save your strength. You'll need it soon. The words I couldn't shake all day. And I remembered the second note in the button box. You can endure anything. Now those lines were no longer a riddle. They became strangely true. Too true. The doorbell rang. Alia arrived quickly, 20 minutes later. I heard quick, slightly uneven footsteps on the stairs, as if she'd been running all the way. I opened the door before she could knock. She stood in the threshold, pale, upset, her eyes mingled with fear and hope. Mom. She simply stepped toward me and hugged me. Tightly, desperately. Like a child clinging to the shore until the wave carries them away. Come in, I said, patting her back. We'll discuss everything quietly. She took off her coat and sank into a chair like someone who no longer needed to control herself. I put the kettle on and took out the cookies. She didn't touch them. She just stared at the table. Mom, I'm confused, she finally said. I don't know what to do. Serioza and I. She paused. We didn't plan this. And things are already tough for us. He's tired. I'm tired. We're low on money. We're low on strength. Her voice wavered. I'm scared. I sat down opposite her, quietly, so she wouldn't think I was pressuring her. You're not alone, I said. And you won't be alone. She closed her eyes. I know, she whispered, but I don't know how to live my life. And she began to talk, for a long time, about how Serioza works nights, but still doesn't have enough money, that the apartment is cramped, that her grandson is wonderful, but difficult to handle, that she herself has long been at her wit's end. She spoke and I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't give advice. I simply listened, the way she'd been asking for so long, but hadn't been able to say it. And at some point I noticed her shoulders slumped, her face relaxed, her words became calmer. Sometimes a person doesn't need a solution, but a place where they can breathe. Silence between us. When she ran out of breath, a soft silence fell over the room. Alia looked as if she'd shed several years. Mom. She looked up. I'm afraid I'll ask you for help, and you won't be able to handle it. I know you have health problems. I know it's hard for you. I know that. She swallowed. That sometimes I've demanded too much. She admitted it herself for the first time, without my words, without a hint. Herself. Alia, I said quietly, taking her hand. I'll help, but only in a way that doesn't destroy me. We'll need to learn a new life. Together. But the right way. She nodded, relieved, but also anxious. I understand, she said finally. Mom, I want to keep the baby, but I'm scared. Very scared. I don't know how we'll manage. And again, I felt a growing warmth. Love is fear mixed with hope. We can manage, I said, if you're honest with me, until the very end. She smiled, wearily but truly. Mom, I love you. Those words, I haven't heard them in that voice for a long time. Not quickly, not guiltily, but calmly. And at that moment I thought, maybe everything really will start to change. Slowly, but correctly.
But the note haunted me.
When Alia went home, I returned to the kitchen. I sat down. I placed the two notes next to each other. Save your strength. You'll need it soon.
And
you can handle anything. Now, they seemed less like a riddle than like a hint. But from whom? I felt like a person walking along a familiar path, but suddenly notices someone leaving small pebbles by the side of the road. Not threatening, not frightening, as if guiding. But where? Late evening. I went to bed later than usual, but sleep didn't come. I lay there, listening to Myra's restless pacing near the door, as if someone were walking up the stairs too slowly, too quietly. And again, I remembered those words. They'll be needed soon. And for the first time I thought, what if it's not about the pregnancy? The air in the apartment was strangely thick at night. Not heavy, no, just different, as if the silence had become not emptiness, but something alive, attentive. I woke up not from a sound, from a sensation, as if someone had called my name, not out loud, but in my mind. I lay with my eyes open, staring into the darkness, and realized not a single object in the room seemed out of place. Even though everything stood as usual, it wasn't anxiety, but a feeling as if the world had shifted slightly, just a little, a centimeter. I rose carefully, so as not to wake Mira. But Mira was already sitting on the floor, warm, fluffy, the silence within her taut as a string. She was looking at the door, that very door, into the hallway. I looked there too, and of course saw nothing. Darkness and silence.
but the air had changed.
Not scary, not cold, but attentive,
As if someone was watching me.
not evil, not hostile, but as if studying. I walked into the hallway. The floor was slightly cool. The walls were ordinary. Not a shadow, not a trace, not a sound. But I knew something was wrong. The hallway smelled of light dust, but not the kind that accumulates during the day, but old,
thin.
like in apartments where the doors haven't been opened for a long time. I ran my hand along the wall. It was smooth, but beneath my fingers there was a barely perceptible vibration, as if the house were breathing with me. Fatigue, I would have told myself in the past. But now, after the two notes, after Alya's confession, after the strange sensations of the last week, I couldn't dismiss it so easily. It wasn't my imagination. It was a warning. Returning to the room. When I returned, Mira came up to me and rubbed herself against my leg, but she was still looking at the door. Not the way cats sometimes stare into space, but intently, as if she were waiting. I sat down next to her and stroked her. "What are you feeling, girl?"
Cats don't speak.
But sometimes their silence speaks louder than words. She blinked slowly and turned away. It was as if she were saying, "It's quiet for now, but keep an eye out." Morning. The light entered the room softly, as if afraid to disturb. I woke up tired. That's how it happens after a night that hasn't given me any peace. But not broken, just wary. I made some tea, went to the window, and saw a mark on the glass. Barely noticeable, as if someone had touched the glass with their fingers during the night. But the mark was inside. From the side of the room, I walked closer. I ran my hand over it. It disappeared. A few days ago, I wouldn't have paid any attention to it. But now there were too many small coincidences in my life, forming a pattern. Noticeable, but still unclear. Neighbor. When I went out to take out the trash, I met Lena in the stairwell. She was always quiet, unobtrusive, avoiding conversations as if afraid to disturb. But today she stopped herself. "Maria?" Her voice was quiet, but with a new, unfamiliar tremor. Everything okay with you?" I was surprised. "Yes," I said.
Why?
She glanced up the stairs, as if checking to see if they were empty. "It's just, she lowered her voice. "Last night late, someone was standing in your building." Standing. She nodded. For a long time. About 20 minutes, probably. I heard footsteps, not walking, not coming down, just standing. "On my landing?" "I think so." She looked up. "I didn't mean to scare you. I just thought you needed to know." Something tightened inside me. Not fear. More like confirmation. The puzzle slowly came together. Someone was at my door. That night, when I woke up to the feeling of a presence. Lena stood there for a moment, hesitating. "Maria?" she said quietly. "If anything happens, knock on my door. I'm almost always home."
I smilte her gratefully.
This timid woman suddenly seemed the most attentive person in the house. "Thank you, Lena. I'll knock." After she left, I stood by my door and stared at it for a few seconds. Just stared. The door was ordinary, the same one I'd entered through thousands of times. But now it seemed to me not as a protection, but as a boundary between what I knew and what was just beginning to emerge. Evening. The day passed calmly, but calmly in the way that happens before a change in the weather. When the air is still, but you feel it ready to move. I found the notes again. I placed them next to the phone. I stared at them for a long time. The words were too precise, too timely, too deliberate. "Save your strength. You'll need it soon. You can handle anything." I ran my finger over the paper. It was slightly rough, as if it had lain somewhere for a long time. And for the first time, a thought occurred to me, the one I'd been afraid of before. This is written by someone who knows me too well. But who? And the night was restless again. Not scary. Not dangerous. Just wary. As if the shadow by the door had grown a little thicker, and the silence a little louder. And as I fell asleep, I knew. Something is approaching me. Quietly.
Carefully.
And I must be ready. The morning began with rain. Thin, transparent, almost weightless. It tapped on the windowsill so softly, as if afraid to disturb my thoughts. I stood by the window with a cup of tea and listened to this quiet rhythm, and inside I felt exactly the same. A quiet tremor that didn't yet know what to do, to calm down or to intensify. Mira sat next to me, looking at the rain, and her calm somewhat balanced mine. But something inside still insistently reminded me, you haven't understood the main thing yet. Mailbox. By lunchtime, the rain had stopped. The courtyard became damp, dark, but fresh. I decided to go downstairs, to pick up the mail just for a walk, to clear my head. As I walked down the stairs, I caught a strange sensation, as if the hallway was warmer than usual today. Not the air, but the atmosphere. As if someone had been here recently. Not far. Very close. I opened the mailbox. There were 3 advertising flyers, an electricity bill, and a small envelope. A regular one.
Postal.
With a stamp. But the address was handwritten, and I recognized the handwriting immediately. I froze. My heart began to beat slower. A warm, painful wave filled my chest. It was my brother's handwriting. Brother. We hadn't spoken for 10 years. Not because we fought, though we did, but because his life was falling apart faster than he could fix it. Alcohol.
Debts.
Problems. I helped him as much as I could, as much as my conscience allowed, and as much as my immense love for him drained me of strength. But one day, he disappeared. Simply disappeared. He went somewhere north, leaving no address, and I didn't even know if he was alive. I held the envelope with trembling fingers, and everything inside was gathering into a tight knot. Why did he write now? How did he find my address? And what did his letter have to do with those strange notes? The shadow of anxiety grew thicker. The letter. When I returned home, I hesitated for a long time before opening it. I placed it on the table. I sat down opposite him, and only after a few minutes did I slowly tear the edge. The letter was short, 2 pages, yellowed paper, as if it had been stored for a long time, and the words, as if he wrote them, not daring to breathe. Masha, little sister, if you're reading this, it means I finally succeeded. Please don't be afraid. I felt a chill in my chest. I've wanted to write to you for a long time, but I was afraid. I was afraid it would hurt you to hear about me again. You did more for me than you should have. And I left then not because I didn't want to talk, but because I wanted to get you out of my problems. The past, which I had tried so hard to keep quiet for so long, slowly reared its head. I couldn't find myself, Masha.
But I did understand something.
You're the only person who never abandoned me. And when I found out you were having health problems, I started looking for ways to help. My fingers trembled. I didn't know how he found out about my diagnoses, but I knew. Someone told him. Maybe Alia. Maybe someone he knew. It didn't matter. Then the text got strange.
So strange.
Masha, if you've been receiving strange words lately, don't be afraid. It's from me. I stopped. A chill ran down my spine. He continued, I couldn't write to you right away. I was afraid you'd be startled by my sudden appearance. So first I decided to just remind you. You're strong. You can handle this. I wanted you to feel like you weren't alone. The world around me seemed to grow quieter. He wrote, I'll be back.
Soon.
But I don't want you to know the exact day. I want to see you as you are.
Alive. Real.
With you. And the last line, please, save your strength. You'll really need a lot of warmth when we see each other. I put the letter on the table, and for the first time in a long time, my hands began to shake for Real. The light and shadow at the same time. I sat like that for about 10 minutes, just staring into space. My brother is alive, and he wrote to me. This is joy, but he was here, not far away, in the entryway.
This is anxiety.
And he knows about my illnesses, about my weaknesses. This is pain, and he writes me notes, leaves traces, walks near the door. This is not danger, but not peace either. This is a shadow from the past, returning, and not knowing which to become, warm or cold. I went out onto the balcony. The rain had already stopped. There was no wind, no birds. The world was quiet, as if listening to me. And I said quietly into the void, Vitalik, if you're really here, please, don't take any sudden steps. I'm older than I was. I can't bear any more pain. But the wind only answered with the soft rustle of leaves. I returned to the room. Mira was sitting by the door, the one that led to the entrance. She looked at her unblinking. I walked over and sat down next to her. He's back, I whispered, or we'll be back soon. The cat blinked,
Calmly.
but attentively, as if to say, be prepared. And I realized, it's not that my brother is nearby that's scary. The scary thing is, I don't know why he came back. The morning came unexpectedly clear. That's how it is after rain, as if the night had washed away something unnecessary, something heavy, and left only a light base. I woke up lighter than I expected. My body still remembered the anxiety, but inside there was a feeling of delicate balance, as if the day promised something good. I got up, put the kettle on, and Mira was hovering around me, as if she'd been waiting for a long time, for me to stop thinking only with my heart, and finally remember the simple little joys. I took out a vase of honey. I hadn't opened it in a long time. The sweetness smelled like childhood. I stirred a spoonful of tea, and for the first time in several days I felt a taste. Not just the taste of tea, but the taste of the moment. This happens when the brain stops racing. And that was good. A knock on the door. Quiet, cautious. Not demanding, not nervous. Gentle, as if the person behind the door didn't want to embarrass me. I approached, opened the door. A little boy stood in the doorway, about 7 years old, wearing a jacket a size too big for him. His eyes were huge, bright, and shy. Are you Aunt Maria? He looked at me as if afraid he might be mistaken. Yes, I answered, surprised. And who are you? He straightened up like a little soldier.
I'm Sasha.
We moved to the third floor yesterday. Mom said you're kind. She asked me to pass the pies. He handed me a small container. It smelled of vanilla and apples. I melted inside. Not from the pies, but from the way he held them with both hands, as if he were carrying something enormous and precious. Thank you very much, Sasha. Come in, do you want some? He looked embarrassed and blushed. I'm not allowed in, Mom said. Take them and come back. She's a little worried.
Bye.
He spoke so sincerely that I smiled. Then tell Mom I'm very grateful, and that she can come by whenever she wants. I'll be glad. He nodded, seriously and maturely. I'll tell you. And he ran down the stairs. I closed the door, and for the first time in many days I felt a small, warm candle burn in my chest. Kind people still exist. The world is still kind.
Pies.
I opened the container. The pies were warm, just a little bit, as if they'd just been taken out. I broke off a piece and suddenly
cried.
Not from the taste, not from the pies, but from the feeling that someone had thought of me just like that, without benefit, without asking, without conditions. In old age, that's almost a luxury. I sat in the kitchen, eating the pie in small pieces, and felt something very important returning within me, something I'd lost long ago. The feeling of not being alone. A call from Alia. The phone rang as I was finishing my tea. Alia was on the screen. I immediately felt warmth inside. Her voice was calmer than yesterday. Mom, can I come over this evening? I wanted just to spend a little time with you. No talking. Just there. I smiled. The way you smile when your heart finally stops trembling. Come, of course. And one more thing. She hesitated. Mom, thank you for yesterday. I feel better, really better. And I heard in her voice something I hadn't heard in a long time. Not guilt, not irritation, not a tired emptiness, but gratitude. Honest. It was like medicine. Neighbor Lena. When I went out to the landing to take out the trash, Lena was standing by her door, was about to leave, but paused when she saw me. She smiled timidly. Maria, I baked a pie. If you want, I'll leave a piece. I almost laughed. Today was a day of unexpected treats. Oh, Lena, you spoil me so much. Thank you. Of course, keep it. She handed me the foil, and I noticed her hands were shaking a little more than usual. Did you sleep normally? She asked. Very quietly, almost in a whisper. Yes, I answered softly. Thank you for letting me know yesterday. She looked away. I just thought maybe it was important to you. And suddenly, unexpectedly, I took her hand. You're very considerate, Lena. Thank you. Her eyes widened slightly, as if no one had said such simple things to her in a long time. We said goodbye. I returned to the apartment with a pie and a slice of cake. And for the first time in a long time, I felt part of something bigger than just the walls of my apartment. Evening. Alia arrived closer to 7.
No fus, no upset face. No childish resentments.
She looked
tired, but calm.
She took off her coat, came up to me and hugged me, not like a child, and not like an adult. Who knows, this is how it's supposed to be. But honestly, really, Mom, she said quietly, I want to tell you this again. Thank you. We sat in the kitchen for almost 2 hours.
Drinking tea.
Silently. Just silently. And that silence was warm, like a wool sweater you've worn for decades. But when Alya left, I picked up my brother's letter. I reread it, and suddenly I noticed something I hadn't seen before. On the second page at the bottom, in very small handwriting, almost illegible, there was a postscript, very brief. Forgive me, I don't have much time left. I froze. The world became quiet again, and tense. The bright chapter of the day made the final line more painful, because now it contained no cold fear, but the warmth of loss. And I understood. My joy today, Pies, Lena, Sasha, Alya, was given to me for a reason. It was given as support. Before what lay ahead, the night before this day was surprisingly calm. I woke up early, as if I knew. The morning would be special. Not joyful, not heavy, but deep. The light in the room was soft, slightly golden, as if the sun, too, was afraid to be loud. Mira lay nearby, quiet, calm, her tail barely moving, as if she sensed that this day needed to be lived carefully. I made tea, but didn't drink it for a long time. I sat by the window and listened to the world slowly awaken, and a thought, which I had long pushed away, gradually gathered inside me. He's coming today. A knock on the door. It was quiet, unsure, as if the person behind the door wasn't sure he had the right to knock. I approached the door slowly. My heart beat steadily.
Calmly.
I opened it, and there he was, my brother, Vitaly.
He had aged.
A lot. His eyes were dull, his cheeks were sunken, his hair was gray, but his gaze was the same one my little brother, the boy who always hid behind me. When we were scared, he stood, holding onto the railing, as if it were his last support. Mashenka, he said quietly. Hello. My throat tightened, but I wasn't crying. I simply stepped aside and said,
Come in.
He entered slowly. Every step was difficult for him. I didn't even ask what was wrong with him. There was no need. I already understood everything. I sat him down in the kitchen. I poured him tea. He held the cup with both hands, as if it warmed him from the inside. We were silent for a long time, but it was the kind of silence that only close people, separated for a long time, know. A silence in which,
hello,
and how are you, and I missed you, and I'm sorry, and thank you, all at once. He spoke first. Masha, I'm sick. Simple, straightforward, calm, like a person who's already accepted everything. The doctors said, he chuckled softly, that I should have been treated sooner, much sooner, but I never had neither the money nor the brains. I looked at his hands, thin, trembling. Are you alone now? I asked. He nodded. I've always been alone, Masha. That's just the way I am. I thought I was protecting you when I disappeared, but it turned out like always. He lowered his head. I don't want to die alone, Masha. And I don't want you to drag me out of the hole again. That's not why I came. He looked up. I came to say goodbye. Quietly, warmly, like a human being, and so that you don't hold a grudge against me. The tears came as quietly as rain. I didn't cry loudly. I sat across from my brother and let the tears simply flow, not from grief. The grief was long-standing, because sometimes life gives a second chance, but only for forgiveness, not for correction. I took his hand. She was cold.
Weak, but dear.
You're not alone, Vitalik, I said. And you won't be alone. He exhaled, as if that exhalation held years of fear within it. He pulled a small package from his pocket. This is for you. I've been saving up money for the last few months. Not much, but you'll need it. You've helped me all my life. Just once, I want to help you. I wanted to refuse, but he shook his head.
Don't argue.
Otherwise, it will be hard for me to leave peacefully. I took the package. I didn't look inside. It didn't matter. What mattered was that he didn't do it out of pity, but out of love. We sat for a long time. We talked about childhood,
About Mom. About school.
about who became who. He laughed sometimes dryly, quietly, but sincerely, and it was the laughter of a man. Who knows? That time is short, and every sound a gift. When the sun grew pale, he stood up. I have to go, Mashenka. I still have to go. Where? I asked. To the hospice. They're waiting there. It's peaceful there. My insides sank, but I knew I couldn't stop him. He didn't come for help. He came for forgiveness. I hugged him, tightly, warmly, with what strength remained within me. He laid his head on my shoulder, and I felt him tremble, just a little, like a child tired of being an adult. Thank you, Masha, he said, because you've always been my home.
And he left, slowly,
Quietly, without looking back. I stood in the doorway until his footsteps faded on the stairs, until the silence became deafening, until the house returned to its normal breathing. I returned to the kitchen. On the table lay a letter, 2 old notes, and a small package. I unfolded it. Inside was money, a small sum, but that's not the point. And a note, very short. You'll get through this, as always. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in many days, I felt not anxiety,
but peace. Long, deep, warm.
Alia called that evening. Her voice was soft. Mom, how are you? I've been thinking about you all day today. And I said, everything's fine, honey. Today was a difficult day, but a good one. She didn't ask any questions. She simply said, Mom, I love you very much. And I felt the line of life, which stretched from the past to the future.
Close softly, and rightly so. Night.
I went to bed early. Mira curled up next to me, as if she, too, were tired. And for the first time in weeks, I fell asleep without worry. Not because everything had become perfect.
No.
But because I was no longer afraid of my shadows, and the past, and the future, and because I knew I really can endure anything